This is the second half of the SportsMax Zone for this Wednesday. We're back. The International Olympic Committee, the IOC, is proposing to lift the suspension imposed on Russia and Belarus following Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. The IOC excluded Russian and Belarusian athletes from participating in its competitions and urged fellow international sporting bodies to do the same. Now, but speaking on Tuesday, the IOC President Thomas Bach recommended that individual athletes from Russia and Belarus be allowed to return to competition under a neutral status as long as they have no military links, while keeping the door closed regarding team sports such as football and basketball. Bach says the decision to continue excluding Russia and Belarusian athletes is tantamount to discrimination. This is not a grey area of international law, he says. It is something that binds all states and all individuals. For this reason, the blanket prohibition of Russian and Belarusian athletes and artists cannot continue. It is a flagrant violation of human rights. Anyone has the right not to be discriminated against on the basis of their passport. Meanwhile, the Olympic gold medalist and former heavyweight champion Ukrainian Vladimir Klitschko has criticized the IOC's decision to reintegrate Russia and Belarusian athletes into international sports. The IOC authorizes the Russian and Belarusian athletes to participate at the Olympic Games under neutral flags. This decision is a false flag. Thomas Bach serves the colors and interests of Russia, he says. This decision contaminates the Olympic spirit and is like this war and nonsense. Vladimir Klitschko says the IOC proposal does not yet include the possibility of Russian and Belarusian athletes participating in Paris 2024. That's the Olympic Games next year. Joining us to discuss this development is senior writer at SportsMax.tv, Leighton Levy. Leighton, should the international sporting community welcome back Russia and Belarusian athletes?
You know, I've been thinking about it all day, and it's a difficult question to answer from the perspective of there are athletes in Russia and Belarus that have no interest in what's going on in the war.
Yes.
They are being denied an opportunity to earn, because remember, especially when it comes to track and field, where athletes don't earn as much as other sports, this cuts off their earning, and they might be innocent victims of what has been going on between Russia and Ukraine since February last year. So from that context, I understand the argument that Bach is making. However, I go back to 1979 when Russia invaded Afghanistan and the United States boycotted the Moscow Olympics in 1980, and of course Russia in turn boycotted the 84 Olympics in Los Angeles. This goes beyond politics, I think, because the reality is, in the eyes of many, especially in Europe and in the United States, what Russia has done and has been doing in the Ukraine is basically egregious. Therefore, to cut them off from the international community is perhaps the best thing to do, to send the message that we will not tolerate any such action going forward. Because the reality is that while the Olympic spirit is one of inclusion, what is happening in Ukraine right now is anything but. And I think that's the message that the rest of the world wants to send. Because as much as Bach, you know, there's a lot of resistance to it, okay? And it's not just the Ukrainian athletes who are saying this. It's athletes across the board. Germany, you know, there are a whole bunch of fencers across the globe who are against this move. And of course, there are a lot of track and field athletes who are against this move as well, notwithstanding the fact that some of the world's best athletes would be suffering because of this action. So it's a difficult question to answer, but if I should come down on a side, I'd have to come down on the side of those who are against putting Russia and Belarus back into the Olympics, because I think what is happening from those two countries, democracy, this is not a cliche to say that democracy is under threat. Right-wing politics has almost taken over the world in the last 5 to 6 years, maybe a little longer than that. And I think the only way to fight back is to put up some kind of resistance to the movement and show the world that, look, we are together in the spirit of supporting democracy and the rights of individual countries to protect their sovereignty from countries like Russia.
And history records sporting organizations or global sport taking political positions. The position to ban South Africa from sport because of their apartheid policies, I think, was globally accepted because we all felt racism and apartheid was wrong. But that in itself was a discrimination against, if we are to go by what Bak is saying now, against some South African athletes who may not have supported apartheid anyway. So
absolutely.
I take your point that this is a very, very difficult one. But I don't think the IOC, Ricardo, could comment on this as well, could, based on its statutes, take a different position that they're taking now.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Lance. It's very difficult for the International Olympic Committee to take any other stance than the one that Thomas Bach has taken in this situation. Because, as he pointed out, it is tantamount to discrimination based on your nationality. Yeah. In fact, it's the very point that the head of the Russian Olympic Committee made in saying that the announcements by Thomas Bach was unacceptable. Yeah. And I wanted to find out from Leighton if he found those comments surprising coming from the head of the Russian Olympic Committee, just for the simple fact that this is the start of the reintegration process. But the head of the Russian Olympic Committee is saying this is not enough. We shouldn't be in a position where where our athletes are competing under neutral flags. We shouldn't be in a position where we are subjected to more stringent drug testing, which will also happen as part of the reintegration process. So did it strike you as a surprise that the Russian Olympic Committee didn't just say, thank you very much, this is a good start, as opposed to, no, this is just not enough, this is unacceptable, well, we want more?
For the Russians, the arrogance is plausible in the sense that it's how do I couch this? Russia believes that they have the right to be back in sport, okay, international sport.
Fully.
Fully.
The president says neutral status is a violation of human rights.
Yeah, but that's like the pot calling the kettle black here, because they're violating rights across the board here. But the reality is this: Russia was, first of all, extricated from the rest of the world because of their anti-doping, their wanton disregard, for example, of the anti-doping policies established by WADA. This was the reason why they were excluded to begin with. Now, there is, in addition to that, there is this political situation now with them and Ukraine. And the world has taken a position that what they're doing is not acceptable. That Bach is now saying that they want to see a gradual return of Russia and Belarus into international competition is unacceptable. It speaks of a level of arrogance that is typical of the mindset of the Russian, the political administration there, in terms of what they believe they have a right to. Because, look, the politics of what is happening between Russia and Ukraine is based on a perception by Putin that Russia is under threat from NATO. And as a result, you know, Ukraine is right there, you know, and of course Finland and other countries are considering
perfectly positioned,
membership of NATO. But it's a false flag in that Russia has never been under threat from any of these countries. So on that basis, from a political standpoint, that Russia says that a phased reintroduction, and of course athletes
is unacceptable.
Yeah, is unacceptable. The fact that the athletes are going to be no flags, no anthem, no emblems, no teams, so there's no really or anything. Yeah. It's kind of arrogant, isn't it? I think when you look at it, you should be grateful that the IOC is thinking about reintroducing it into the international competition, and understand that if it's going to be on a phased basis, this is probably where it needs to begin.
Where it needs to begin. I have another quick one for you based on what the Russian Olympic Committee president said. He said that this announcement by Thomas Bach is an acknowledgement of the IOC's error to have excluded Russia and Belarusian athletes in the first place?
I disagree with that, actually. But the thing is, look, it was not an error. I think it was a carefully crafted decision, because I think the delicacy of the situation required that they had to be cautious.
If it was a carefully thought out situation, though, Leighton, why is the IOC now going back when nothing has changed from the point when they made the initial decision?
Here's the thing. The reason for that, I believe, is this. Currently, Belarusian and Russian athletes are playing tennis.
Yes, under neutral flags.
Yeah, and they're cycling, and they're, I think, table tennis as well.
Individual sports.
Yeah, individual sports. So if they're already playing international sports,
yes,
there is nothing wrong having them reintroduced into the Olympics, into the Olympic movement. The thing is, from the Olympic movement, it's a different setup. It's more of a familial situation where you're asking them to join you back in a family where you're deliberately attacking a member of that family.
Yeah.
As individual athletes, they're not representing Russia when they go to play in the WTA or the ATP circuit or in table tennis or cycling. They're doing it as individuals. So this is what they do as professional athletes. From an Olympic perspective, it's more of a country basis, and that's where I think that's where the difference is.
Yeah, I just think, as we said at the top, the IOC can't win here. They can't win here because they are meeting Russia halfway, and Russia is condemning them. You know,
yeah.
And even meeting Russia halfway has made others very angry that they are meeting them halfway. And you would think that if others are angry at the IOC stance, maybe the Russians need to be a little bit happy then, since the ones who are against them are angry.
Look,
and they're also angry. So the IOC has made everyone angry.
There's no perfect solution to the situation, right? And it's not a cut and dry thing like that we saw. I will go back again to the Afghanistan situation with Russia and the United States. That was one country against the other. One country making a stand against one country invading another country. This is more dynamic now because it involves sports directly in so many different levels, individually and from a country basis, where there are so many things involved now, professional sport. Because you're telling me, look,
I have 10 seconds.
Yeah, on a regular basis, you're denying hundreds, possibly thousands of athletes from earning a living.
Yes.
And they might have nothing to do with this war.
Yes.
Well, here's what
but at the same time, you know.
Here's what
and a lot of them aren't supporting the war.
No, they're
either.
not.
Yeah. World Athletics has essentially said that as far as the doping issue is concerned, that's clear for Russia, but you can't return to competition because of the war.
As long as the war goes on, Which is,
this is a very dicey situation that we're looking at. The IOC having meetings in Switzerland this week to discuss this very issue, and maybe at the end of the week we'll hear a lot more coming out of the IOC and its position with Russia and Belarus. We go to break. Back with more on the SportsMax Zone after this.
Stay with SportsMax on YouTube and follow us on all social pages for updates, news and entertainment.